Guruve Gaurachandra Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. My Dandavat Pranam devotees. So, this is a short video. I've said that many times in the past, but this one truly is going to be a short video as I have some other services to do. Unfortunately, I believe my microphone is down. I'm not exactly sure, so yeah, I'm not getting any lights. So hopefully this, I had to do this this morning here, or this before early afternoon. So unfortunately, the sound may not be of the best quality. I've certainly been using this microphone system that was donated by one wonderful family. And I've heard really that the sound quality as a result has really been good. And in fact, I've been using the actual mechanism to start attaching it to my lapel to make it even clearer, but apparently I may need to charge this. I did charge it recently, but I guess the charge ran out pretty quickly. But to get to our subject matter, I received some, as I often do, some devotees asking my opinion about a recent podcast with Shriman Namras Prabhu. And the other devotee, I cannot remember his name. I'm making my apologies and begging forgiveness. Both of them do a wonderful job, as Namras himself has done for years, with the podcast, bringing up very interesting subject matter and things that are worthy of discussion in the Vaishnava Mandal and beyond. But anyway, the discussion was, and I did not see the full podcast, and I don't really know the devotee's name who was being interviewed. But in addition to that, there was another podcast by another person. I think his name is Revati Nanda Maharaj, and he belongs to a different grouping or sangha of Vaishnavas, which I don't have very deep familiarity with. But he was interviewing His Holiness Sri Nanda Maharaj, and they were speaking somewhat about, obviously something that Maharaj's champion called Krishna West, and they were giving some dialogue regarding the value or the faults and virtues, or in many cases, I didn't really hear that whole podcast either, but I think they were also looking for the commonality or the synthesis of the different views that people take on how we view Vaishnava dress and culture, and whether or not it is truly Vaishnava culture or is it Indian culture, and as opposed to Western culture, Western manner of dress, etc., etc. So, just again, shortly and concisely, I did speak on this maybe some years ago, actually now, so I could understand it coming up again because it may be buried among, the unlimited amount of question and answer sessions and so forth that have been done. But basically, there are two things. One is, two perspectives can be taken. One is, what is the origins of the nature of Vaishnava dress and the mannerisms in which we do things? Was it born from Indian culture, or was it born from the Vaishnava traditions? And I want to talk a little bit about the importance of tradition, because anywhere in any culture, tradition plays a very important part in shaping the social fabric. When there are no traditions, and it's even mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, when the traditions are lost, then it gives rise to many negative things in society. So tradition is a very valuable thing, and especially when the tradition is linked to spirituality. So in the case of Vaishnava Dharma, among the angas of bhakti that are spoken about by Srila Rupa Goswami Pad in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he mentions Vaishnava Chinadharan. It means the dress and ornaments of a Vaishnava, such as keeping a shika for men, which is the tuft of hair, obviously, on the back of the head, the wearing of kantimala, and especially wearing 3 strands of kantimala, and urdhva pundra, or vertical tilak. So, of course, a lot more significance has been given to the other dress things, such as should it always be kurta and dhoti, or can we wear pants and jackets and so forth and so on. So, of course, that can be debated. Obviously, people, according to their particular social situation, the particular social dynamics they may have to be involved in at a particular phase of their lives, it may be more or less practical for them to wear dhoti and kurta. I worked 2 careers. I had a career in law enforcement and a career in music. And obviously in going to work, especially when I was first hired at the police department, I remember just after passing my entrance exams and all of that, I was confronted with, hey, you're going to have to do 2 things. You're going to have to cut the ponytails, what they called it, which was my shika, and I had to take my tulsi beads, my kantimala, and they said you can wear them as long as they go belong your uniform shirt. So, obviously some adjustments had to be made there, but I always looked at everything that I did as progressive towards the outcome of living a devotional life, and doing my bhajan sadhan. So I looked at those things as a means to an end, but I did not take a perspective on giving some kind of value or metric to the fact that it's unnecessary. I, in fact, felt very much the need to, as soon as possible, regrow a shika and be able to wear my kantimala comfortably as they should be worn. Because for a little while I had to wear them actually almost like a single strand below the uniform. I tried to wear them as I wear them now, and I have worn for many years, but from time to time some official would come by and say, hey, these things are sticking up over your uniform. So, and especially during the time of the police academy itself, I definitely had to wear only the 1 strand because they were extremely vigilant about those kind of things as they're trying to sort of get your mindset, almost like the military, get your mindset in a certain way. So I completely understood making the adjustment where practicality and the pragmatics of what you're doing at a particular time had a lot of sway. But when I was able to change my position, I worked in uniform, obviously, like everyone does when you first come on. But long story short, I went to special operations after so many years, and in special operations, you can do anything you want. So people had beards, dreadlocks, all kinds of things. So I instantly grew my shika back, and I put on my kantimala in the traditional fashion. Because there were no rules and regulations for the officers who worked and investigators who worked in special operations. So I always considered that if Rupa Goswami Pad has mentioned these things as part of Vaishnava Chinadharan, then there is spiritual significance to them. There's not only cultural or external cultural indications, but there are spiritual implications to them. And of course, in the Padma Puran and in many other sastras, the glory of Urdhva Pundra Tilak, the glory of Kantimala, the glory about wearing a shika, all these things are described in full in sastra. So it's not something that is simply a cultural phenomenon that our Srila Prabhupada decided to impose on the Western world. Rather, there are some very deep spiritual values to these things, and of course, the largest one being the impressions that are created by anything you do. Any kind of cultural framework you operate in will give impressions to your consciousness. Just like if you look in contemporary society, the dress codes, the way people listen to certain kinds of music, what they call what is it? I don't know. I'm trying to find this word if I can remember it. Pop culture, for instance. That's a good example. Whatever the cultural trend is, so to speak, that becomes a great impression on the consciousness of people. So when a particular cultural phenomenon is impressed, just like I saw in the urban community, how the culture shifted over years and the kinds of conscious impressions that made. I grew up in an era, and I'm not dating myself, where wearing your clothing in a very nice way, in a fitted, fashionable way, was the trend. Later on, wearing your clothes in a way that apparently did not fit, and I'm making reference to urban culture where it became a habit to wear your pants below your waistline and all these sort of things. Obviously, those things created not only a social dynamic as a whole, since everybody started to imitate and emulate it, but it also created a kind of consciousness around it, because it's accompanied by a certain kind of music, it's accompanied by a certain kind of language, right? Because then the whole dynamic of how people speak to each other becomes influenced by it. That takes place also in the music they listen to. And it's not only in that sense of pop or hip hop or other kinds of culture, but even in so-called, and I'm putting quotes up here, because the material metric about how we analyze culture and so forth is really both insignificant for one, and two, it's completely relative. So on the other hand, when you had people who said, well, we're going to have a suit and tie culture and we'll listen to classical music, so forth, and that also creates a certain kind of impression on the consciousness. So in both cases, my point here is that the dress, the music you listen to, everything else does have an impression on your consciousness. So when it was seen by Rupa Goswami Pad that a Vaishnava should have these ornaments, it wasn't a haphazard thing. It was actually to create a spiritual impression. So it was not part of a mundane Indian culture per se. It was part of a spiritual culture born from the realizations of the associates of Mahaprabhu, Rupa Goswami Pad, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, right? So the nature of all of the activities done within the Vaishnava culture, they have significance. Another thing will be about the particular kind of style of kirtan or music that's done in Vaishnava culture. So actually at a very big festival and Ishtagoshti means like a meeting for discussion, in Kaituri, that was put on by one of our spiritual mentors, Acharyas, Srila Narottam Das Thakur. At this huge festival in Kaituri, it was presided over by Janavama, the wife of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. And there, the standards of kirtan were also organized. How we do kirtan, doing kirtan in a kram. A kram means in a progressive order, from Guru to Vaishnava to Mahaprabhu, then Radha Krishna kirtan. So, and also the particular musical style, Garanahati, Manusai, and Raneti were three styles of kirtan born from that festival, and they were approved by Janavama. So we could say, well, what difference does it make, since the holy name is all auspicious, and if it is culturally more pleasing to the ear of people in a particular country or locale, why can't we switch everything around and do it according to what the local culture predicts? Well, there are two things. One is that, again, everything has its vibrational level. Food, music, everything has its vibrational level. That vibrational level will be within the modes of nature, goodness, passion, or ignorance. So there is a transcendent quality to the authorized styles of kirtan that were given by Janavama at the festival in Kaituri. Now, of course, kirtan itself, which kirtan means our process of musical worship, for lack of a better word, right? is really been described in scripture as Savot Bhavena Kirtan. Savot Bhavena Kirtan means the essence of the kirtan is the bhav, or the realization of the kirtaniyas. Kirtaniyas means those who are performing the kirtan. So the real essential ingredient is the mood or bhav that's in the kirtan. The musical styles that were approved by Janavama at Kaituri nourish those moods. So there's a big difference. I said I had a second career in music, and there's a huge difference between performing kirtan or bhajan in a jazz setting, right, with jazz music and jazz chords and so forth and so on, as opposed to the nature of the kirtan that was developed by Narottam Das Thakur and other kirtaniyas at Kaituri, right? So everything has its value, and everything has its way of making an impression. So the impression created by the nature of the rag and tal, means the rhythm and the melodies grown from the realized souls who were present there. That's a tradition that is passed down. And if you go to any culture of antiquity, you'll find the same thing. I preached in Africa for many years, and there is a culture of music and song related to spirituality that's passed down from generation to generation. And they don't deviate from that. They have their own secular fields of music, obviously. Just like in the West, we have our own secular fields of music. Whether it's pop music, country music, classical music, whatever it is, but all of those secular forms of music carry the impressions that are related to them. And they also are still situated within the modes of nature. So when we talk about Vaishnav mood of kirtan, we're really talking again about Savot Bhavena Kirtan. That kirtan imbued with the bhavs which have come down in parampara. Parampara means our mentorial succession. So just as the knowledge of spiritualities come down in a succession, the methodology of practice has also come down in a succession. So we value the internal experience of those mentors who passed down things in the way they did because they saw a spiritual value in it. When our Srila Prabhupada came to the Western world, Srila Prabhupada was not unfamiliar with Western culture. So he very well could have come and immediately established there's no need for dhoti and kurta, that simply put on Western dress, etc., etc. Now, of course, in the sort of preaching modality that was undertaking, Srila Prabhupada saw for preaching, it was fine to go out in a Western clothes to accomplish some aspects of preaching. So I'm again here not denying that there is some value to creating a bridge for people in terms of preaching to go out in secular clothes. I'm not at all denying that. What I don't think should be put forward is either a dichotomy between traditional Vaishnava behavior, dress, culture, music, etc., and Western culture, dress, music, etc. I don't think you have to make a dichotomy out of it. I think whatever is anukul, because the principle of bhakti is anukulesha sankalpa, pratikulesha vivajnam. What is favorable or unfavorable is always seen in view of how it will help bhakti. Bhakti is also more than just preaching. So this is another thing. If we've come from a background where the greatest emphasis is the proselytizing or preaching mission, and we lose sight of the fact that our own internal growth and the practices and policies and cultural additives which help that internal spiritual growth, if they are all minimized for the ideal of, quote, preaching, then it becomes a preaching phenomenon, not a necessarily spiritual one. Right? You understand? In other words, the base core then becomes preaching and how much success we're having in preaching. And preaching success will be measured in numbers and so forth and so on. So, and that in some cases can be part of a corruption of the actual process of bhakti, because we can start to look at material metrics like how many devotees are being made, how many temples are being built, etc., etc. But what is the quality of people coming in that environment? Are they truly growing in bhakti? Are they having realization of their inner reality? Are they making the connection between the practice and the goal of the practice? So if those things aren't happening, but you're accumulating more and more people, that's not necessarily success, even according to Srila Prabhupada himself. At one point, Srila Prabhupada said, we have gathered so many people, and now it's time to boil the milk, which meant to intensify the practice among those who have come to Krishna consciousness. Now, there are other factors to be considered, which is that most people who come to the path of bhakti certainly come from previous samskars, which means that there is some driving force in their internal being that also brings them to bhakti. So it's not all based just on the expertise of creating preaching strategies. You understand? A lot has to do with the sukriti that a person has to come to the path of bhakti. Bhakti is sudurlabh, means it's rare. So if a person has praktanik, means previous spiritual impressions in bhakti, then they may become naturally attracted. To create a wider net for that to happen, there's no fault in it. So I'm not, again, disparaging the idea of preaching. I worked for many years with His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, and I believe, quite frankly, he was the actual pioneer in many of these things, because he had developed a strategy of using appropriate dress in appropriate situations, but he did not at the same time abandon the tradition of Vaishnava dress in Vaishnava circles. So in other words, where it was necessary as strictly a preaching strategy, he did that. If he felt that it would lessen the obfuscations that come in people's minds regarding hearing the philosophical content of bhakti because they were too distracted by the external presentation, then he accommodated that. But he always brought things back into the fold of the tradition. So in Vaishnava circles itself, he maintained dhoti and kurta, proper sannyas dress, etc., etc. So whatever anyone does, obviously, has to be based on their own inspiration and so forth and so on. But we do have to set out the sastric statements and the spiritual implications given by our acharyas of how we look at things. So we can't simply walk into a intellectual dynamic around strategies for preaching. So this is right and absolutely right because it's a strategy to bring more people. So we have to create that balance. There may be times, as I mentioned, when I was going to work, obviously it was not practical in order to facilitate being able to travel and preach now. If I had not had the facility to work and save and do different things to create a financial basis under which I could now retire and dedicate myself to preaching, which I've done for so many years now, then that would not have been a viable thing, right? I may have had my dhoti, kurta, tilak, kantimal, everything, but I would have had no prospect for serving according to the order of my Gurudev. You understand? So we do have to use pragmatics, obviously, in this life, but it doesn't set up a dichotomy with following the traditions passed down by our spiritual mentorial succession, our Guru Parampara. So I don't think necessarily it's really a debate as much as it is a perspective. And the perspective should be whenever we have the opportunity to keep the impressions that come from the culture of bhakti and to nourish our internal impressions based on that, what has been passed down, we should take full advantage of it. Where there's a necessity due to life's pragmatics or there's a strategy for preaching, then it can certainly be understood to make the adjustments necessary to accomplish that. Right? So I again have spoken on these things before, but I guess it was quite a few years ago, and I didn't see any harm in kind of repeating it. I have not really changed posture on these things. And I'm only one person, right? But I certainly have the duty as well as the personal desire to put things on the table that broaden the conversation, especially when it's related to our practice and the teachings of Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra. So that was my intent today, just to put up that perspective and to perhaps give more food for thought around the issue. Again, maybe I'll go back and look at both podcasts in full if I get the time. But just from what I gleaned and from the questions that were sent to me around it, there's actually only one set of questions, and that was really around Namras's podcast. But while I was looking at that, I saw the other podcast, and I just thought since they were on a similar subject matter, I would take a small glimpse at the other podcast. So basically, that's my take on things, but based on obviously Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra. So again, just in summary, I think both in Vaishnav China Dharan, which means the dress and markings of a Vaishnav literally, and in the manner of how we do kirtan, because the other issue is whether or not there was a necessity to maintain what was considered to be an Indian style of doing kirtan. But we have to remember that even in India, there's so much diversity in the musical landscape. Many of the instruments used in India, like tabla, they were not introduced from the traditional Vedic culture. They came from Islamic culture, right? So you cannot say something is just Indian per se. The actual nature of the bhajans and kirtans that were done by our predecessors were born from, like I mentioned, deep moods, deep spiritual moods. So the rag and the tals that were used were not simply part of an Indian musical tradition. They were born from very deep moods. And it's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam actually in one verse regarding the gopis when Sri Krishna was on the chariot of Akrura and was about to be taken from Braj. It mentions there, Visrajalajja Rudasma Suswaram Govinda Damodhara Madhaviti. They gave up all shyness and began to cry profusely in deep separation as they saw the actual chariot of Akrura taking Krishna from Braj. And at that time, while they were profusely crying, Suswaram, the word swara means like sa re ga ma pa da ni sa. These are the musical notes in the scale. So Suswaram means they created a melody from those notes which fully imbibed their mood. You understand? Here's the key thing. It fully imbibed their moods. And they began to sing the names of Krishna, Govinda, Damodar, Madhav, based on those moods which gave rise to Suswara, notes composed of their moods. So our acharyas have kept to that tradition. So it is not that these styles of kirtan like Renati, Manasai, Garanahati, that they are simply some mundane musical tradition, but they embody Savod Bhava in the kirtan, the moods inherent in those particular kirtan styles and in the particular bhajans related to them. Right? Just like in our practice, even the morning melody that we sing, Samsara Dava Navalida Loka. This melody is called Jagati. And this Jagati Rag, it is the embodiment of separation and meaning at the same time. You understand? So everything is a very deep science in the practice of bhakti. So that particular melody nourishes that time of day and from Nisant Lila going to the start of Pratar Lila. You understand? These are two different divisions of the day under which different pastimes of Radha and Krishna are taking place. So everything in bhakti has some significance that's been passed down by our acharyas. And the contemporary intellectual capacity to strategize for preaching is one thing, but we can't lose focus and insight into the value and the spiritual quality of those things which have come down from our predecessor acharyas, because they all have significance. All right, I think I will end here. As I mentioned, this was meant to be short. I hope the sound is okay. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, the microphone, I guess, needed to be charged. So hopefully this came out all right, or at least audible. And again, I have some questions and answers that have been backed up, but I'm working on a couple of other things in seva to my Guru Padapadma and Guru Parampara right now. Shishashtakam classes have been on Sunday. We'll complete them this Sunday. And the Bhakti Basics class on Thursdays will be completed. And then I guess we'll go back because we're working on one other thing, which is called moods and methods of practice. So one of the things that I experienced a lot while I was traveling this year, and I have some serious regrets because there were some places I was unable to get to when I traveled this year. So I'm going to have to turn around and very quickly get back to the West Coast. So this year, of course, is the East Coast, and again, Texas and Oklahoma. But I think maybe in that following year, if not in the fall, to try to go back again to the West Coast. Of course, all of these things we're doing predominantly by land travel, because it's just easier to navigate going from one program to another by traveling by driving. So the 6,800 miles we covered in this last preaching trip, we'll have to try to repeat again, because there's just too many devotees which I didn't get to see, and I was remiss that I did not, that I'll have to try to make up and get back. But we're also working on, as I was mentioning, a book actually, on the moods and methods of sadhana. Because for many of the places that I did visit, one of the things that was apparent in a lot of cases was devotees who either had questions about or lack of information about the synthesis between the moods involved in the practice that we have. So whatever Sangha you belong to, if it's ISKCON Sangha, if it's, and I don't like to separate them, because ISKCON is a branch of Gaudiya Math. There's not like two separate things, right? We're all coming from the family of Mahaprabhu. So the traditional line of Pariwars, Advaita Parivar, Gadadhar Parivar, Janava Parivar, etc., Nityananda Parivar, they're also ultimately in the family of Mahaprabhu. And similarly, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who graciously, to fulfill the prophecy of Mahaprabhu, introduced the Gaudiya Math, which was the place in which that prophecy could take full shape. And then the mantle that was started by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, actually originally with Bhakti Vinod Thakur, was manifest by Al Srila Prabhupada as a fulfillment of Mahaprabhu's prophecy, Pitviya Chayata Nagararigram Savachapacha Hoibe Mo Nam. That Sri Nam, not only the Akshar of Nam and the chanting of Hare Krishna, Akshar means just the letters, but the conceptions and the moods of Nam would be spread around the world. So that certainly took place by Al Srila Prabhupada, and I say my Guru Pada Padma as well, because Srila Prabhupada created a treasure chest of all the moods of Harinam and all of the understanding of all of the tattvas related to the Atma and to Bhagavan and the relationship. And my Guru Pada Padma very kindly opened up many of the mysteries of those things for those devotees who had come and did so much service to helping Srila Prabhupada in the mission to fulfill the prophecy of Mahaprabhu. So, but I saw that many devotees could not synthesize the moods and the practices and the philosophy. So I thought to try to work to, from the best of my ability, from what I've heard from Guru Sadhu and Sastra, to help to create a book that will be helpful in that manner. Right? Of course, all the books of our acharyas have everything in it. So I was thinking perhaps maybe just in English language, maybe to just try to give some clarity, maybe if that's the right word, to those things, so that devotees have a more fruitful practice. Now, there are many devotees, obviously, who are already very much steeped and clear about the nature of sadhya and sadhana, how to practice and what is the goal, and what are the inherent moods in the practice itself. But for those who are not so aware, I think it would be a valuable service, and certainly I'd like to get the blessing of the Vaishnavas. So if that would be something that would be helpful, then they will be merciful to me, and I can again try to become pleasing to the order of my own Guru Pada Padma. All right, my Dandavad Pranam devotees, thank you so much for your kind attention, and feel free to comment and to correct and to add anything that will be helpful in the comments. Jai Vancha Kalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Hare Krishna. Radhe Radhe.